Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Chef Seth. Today we have on the menu Enchiladas Verdes. This is a recipe I got from my mom, so naturally it's both easy to make and delicious. It's a simple recipe. All the ingredients you should be able to find at your average grocery store. No need for any specialty spice stores or anything crazy like that. The recipe consists of chicken, rice, tortillas, green chilies, salsa verde, olives, cream cheese, and cheddar cheese. Quite possibly, the hardest part of cooking this is just trying to get everything done around the same time. The main two pieces in need of pre-cooking are the chicken and the rice. Most rice cookers take quite a while to cook the rice, so it's a good idea to put that on first and then do the other prep work. First, you'll want to measure out the rice. I usually use about 1.5 cups for this recipe. Sometimes I end up with a little extra at the end, but that's no big deal. It all depends on your own rice preferences and how thick or not thick you want these enchiladas to be. Don't forget, you're gonna need to rinse the rice before you cook it. But remember that it doesn't have to be a spotless, clean rice water. Just make sure it doesn't look anything like this. Next, be sure to add the proper amount of water into your rice cooker. If you don't know the correct ratio, check your user manual that you hopefully didn't throw away the same day you purchased the thing. It should tell you. When you're sure you've got it, close the lid, start the cooker, and you're free to get started on the rest of the filling. For the other prep work, you can start with something simple, or not so simple, like opening this can of green chilies and then pouring out the excess juice. Then do the same with the olives. If you want, you can also cut up the olives. I usually do it because I think it helps them spread out better in the mix. Also, be sure to cut out your cream cheese. The recipe calls for 1/2 stick, but I usually use less because lactose and I just don't get along. Now, finally, comes the chicken. If you haven't already thawed it, it's perfectly fine to use the microwave to defrost the meat. Just be sure to not leave it in for too long. When you think the meat is ready, go ahead and start cutting. I like to cut the meat while it's still slightly frozen because I think it makes the meat easier to cut. It's a little more solid. You're able to grip it a little better. Just like the olives, you're going to want to cut these into really small pieces so they spread throughout the mix and end up in every enchilada. You don't want all the meat concentrated in like 2 enchiladas and then not anything in the others. Once you're happy with the slicing, put some oil into a pan and get to cooking. I usually set the stove to about 4, just below medium, but I know that stoves can vary a lot in heat from stove to stove, so you'll just have to adjust accordingly, based off what you know about your own stove. Now you don't really need to season the chicken, but a little sprinkle of some generic all-purpose chicken seasoning can't hurt it. At this point, you've probably forgotten all about the rice. Make sure to keep the rice cooker clear of any cupboards or anything else hanging over it, because its steam can be damaging to those items if it comes in contact with them. Next is a waiting game. A game of trying to watch the rice cooker clock while adjusting the heat on the chicken so that both finish at roughly the same time. The recipe calls to brown the chicken, so while you don't want to overcook, you also have to make sure it's cooked thoroughly. Luckily, chicken actually turns brown when it's browning, so it's very easy to know when the chicken should be done. When the chicken and the rice are both done, it's time to combine ingredients. You're going to want to add the rice first, and don't be afraid to really glob it on there. It should outweigh the chicken. Then comes the side pieces to this dish. The chilies, olives, cream cheese, and finally, the sauce. And don't be afraid to add some from that second can. Half the second can ends up on top, but the rest is really just extra. Now really stir up those ingredients until they're mixed well and spread evenly, especially the cream cheese. One effective way I've found to blend the cream cheese is to try and break it apart into smaller pieces first and spread those out. When you're all finished mixing, the filling should look something like this. If it does, you're ready to roll. Grease your pan and get ready to make some enchiladas. If you're worried about how this part's going to turn out because you aren't so good at rolling burritos, have no fear. All you have to do for these is put the filling in and twist. No fancy tucking or folding. You can usually fit somewhere between 8 to a dozen of these into one pan, depending on how thick you make them. I usually only fit 8. Once you have them all rolled, add the toppings. Remember that second can of green sauce? Now we use what's left of it and pour it across the top of our enchiladas. Then we start to add the cheese. Once that's all topped, we're ready to bake. The enchiladas should be baked at 350 degrees for 25 to 30 minutes on the middle rack. You're going to be tempted to open the door and check every 5 minutes. Don't give in to that temptation. At 25 minutes, you should check to see whether or not your enchiladas are done. The edges should be getting golden brown and crispy if they are getting done, but if you don't trust yourself, you can always check with a knife. As that kitchen timer runs down, make sure you have a hot pad or something handy ready to both pull out the enchiladas, but also have somewhere to place them. Once you're confident the enchiladas are all the way done and they've passed your knife check or whatever method you use, pull them out, let them cool on the counter for 10 to 15 minutes, and enjoy.